Joining me today is Stephen Burke, and I'm pleased to have him on the channel. I'd firstly like to thank him for taking his time out and dedicating it to the community. And as you know, this channel's about, firstly, intelligence, secondly, best practice, and finally, experience. So I'm going to ask Stephen some questions and on those subjects, using those as the backdrop. But before we do that, let's hand over to Stephen and he can give you a little bit of his background.
Thank you so much, Ross, for the kind introduction and the opportunity to give back to the community. It's not very often that you get to do that, so I applaud what it is you're doing. So my background as a former Chief Information Security Officer, I've worked before that in all different roles in IT, spanning 25 years. Sounds weird saying 25 years. I feel old in saying that, but I feel very young as well, energetic and youthful, and so much more to give. I started out as a programmer. I get into database administration, Unix administration, networking, working with SOX auditors, and then that led me to start hardening systems and trying to penetrate them, which then opened up the whole myriad of IT security and information security, or cybersecurity as it's now known. And that culminated in a Chief Information Security Officer role in the insurance and reinsurance industry. But before that would have been security consultant in insurance also, as well as online gaming. And, you know, when you're a CISO, you pick up so many different experiences about how to do your role. And there's lots of different people involved, that stakeholders you have to work with. And, you know, I think as you pick up more and more experience in the different companies, the different cultures, what you can and should do versus what you want to do, that's really something that, you know, I'm looking forward to talking to you about today.
Going back to an experience that you had, what's a poignant moment that sort of perhaps either personally or professionally, you know, maybe it's an incident, maybe it's just an experience that shaped you, that really sort of took a sort of a swerve in your career and made you think about this whole sort of situation, this whole industry that you're in differently?
It's a great question, and there's so many things that I'd like to speak to answer that. I suppose if I was to talk about some incidents that helped shape me, I think that comes down to who has mentored me. And then there has been a few incidents that gave rise to actually what I'm doing today, and I can go through that. From a mentorship perspective, when you are studying information security, when you're practicing information security, oftentimes you've got to be very careful as to what you do. And the biggest thing that I learned from the CIO that I highly, highly respect was the business must always win. And you can't bring a company from, let's say, 0 to 100. You have to think about how can you change a company in a thoughtful way so that the business wins and continues to win, whilst you're obviously mitigating risks, which are clearly, you know, important and have been rising over the last decade or so to highly sophisticated and more prolific and whatnot. But ultimately, the company has to succeed. So that's one of the biggest things that shaped me in understanding that the business has to win. And don't get in the way of that. And you also have limited resources, so limited time, people, and money. I say this all the time, but every company is under the same constraints. You've only got a few people, you've got budgets that are, you know, what do I spend it on? And you only have a certain amount of time. So what do you spend it on? So prioritize risk based on the risk to the business, working with all the various stakeholders, getting them involved in the conversations, and don't be a silo, and, you know, ensuring that the business again wins because you've got people from the business talking to you. So they were some of the biggest things that I learned about how to approach information security in a business. The second then were obviously incidents that, having invested heavily in lots of technical defenses on the network, whether that be antivirus, whether that be log aggregators like SIEM solutions, whether that be penetration tests, whether it be writing policies, whether it be doing compliance training, it was often around, you know, the realization that people were being targeted by cybercriminals. And when you do certain things such as an annual phishing test, or you do a company policy document that you send out to staff, or you send out a once a year compliance training course, I quickly realized that incidents that were happening were as a byproduct of people not fully understanding the risk, and they were more accidental or convenience seekers. And so the first incident that I wanted to talk about was someone in the financial in the financial department, getting an email from their spouse, and they clicked on it and they ended up losing their credentials, and then their email account was then used to send out lots of different emails to internal as well as external. So that was a bit of an eye-opener when I got the phone call to say, I actually need help. I've lost credentials, I've lost access to my account, and I'm getting told that people are now getting emails from me. That was one. And when you look at certain individuals you highly respect, and you know that they're very well educated, you know that they're aware of risks, and yet it still happens. That was one. And then the second was the convenience seeker, which was in the legal department, who has access to lots of sensitive data at sensitive times in the year, whether you're disclosing filings to the market or board packs or whatnot. That data was put onto a family-owned device that wasn't secured, and we ended up having a situation well, actually, what's happened to this device? Where has it been? Who's been on it? And that really came down to data protection, but it was as a consequence of convenience. Someone was traveling, they wanted to work on this particular device. So there are two incidents that helped shape me, and obviously a backdrop around mentoring me in terms of how I approached security for the good of the business and for the good of my own career.
Yeah. But moving on to best practice now, what have you done differently since then, and what did you do differently within that organisation as a result of what happened in those scenarios?
Well, I founded a company off the back of those experiences, so that's quite a prolific change, and a shameless plug for Cyber Risk Aware. But it was really that realization, Ross, that cyber criminals were targeting people, and no matter what I or my peers had done technically to defend the network, to prevent incidents from people from getting onto the network, it was unfortunately the actions of staff that were actually undermining all of those efforts. And that wasn't because they were being malicious, it was just they didn't understand the risk that they were taking. So for me, I felt that there was something I had to give back to the community, from a product perspective, from a services perspective, but to do something that had never been done before. And that was also tied back to my time as a CISO. And you may recall this, Ross, when we worked together, where I always wanted to leverage the investments I had made in technology so that they all spoke to each other, that I could inform my risk register as a consequence of what incidents I was seeing in my SIEM solution. My results of my patching, that fed into my risk register. So you could see a maturity rating on my risk register on patching based on what the network was telling us. Take that then into human cybersecurity risks. What the vision of Cyber Risk Aware has been, yes, we know cyber criminals are targeting people. We know that staff have to do their day job. They often think that IT security are defending the network and it's their job. However, it's the responsibility of everybody. I would go so far as an obligation on everybody. But how can we help those staff understand when they're taking a risk, when they don't even realize they're taking it? That's the opportunity. And if I go back to, if your network knows that and can see that activity, well, then why not use that to inform when you train staff and what message you give to staff? So this is no longer about annual compliance training. This is about point in time and a user's exact moment of need, that you are giving the right message to the right user at the right time. And that's what we have done. And we're so proud to say that, because yes, you can schedule training to say in January, I'm going to do email security, password security in February, web security in March, et cetera, a combination of courses and videos. That's all point in time. That's trying to get ahead of a problem. Whereas if you're able to inform in response to what somebody does on the network, but that's a game changer. That revolutionizes it. And the win-win is you're actually reducing the admin overhead of actually delivering that program. And you're also maximizing the investment that you've made in the technologies that are actually generating the alarms in the first place. And if you look at patch management, if you look at vulnerability assessments and all that good stuff, they are actionable intelligence on your network to tell you that something needs to be done. And that's the key that we're trying to bring here, is that your staff are your greatest security asset. We know that they're being actively targeted. In fact, over 90% of incidents have been proven to have started with some level of human intervention by a staff member at the start. That statistic is phenomenal. So when you look at information security program, all too often, and I myself included, would have always gone to technology first. However, what has now been shown, and you see the cyber insurance industry talking about this quite a lot, is that the most appropriate approach has to have human-centric approach tied to technology. People, process, and technology all intertwined. And if you can connect all those dots, you are now in a fantastic position, that you're in a defensible position, where if something happens, you're able to stand up and say, well, what more could I have done with limited time, people, and money? I did my technologies, I aligned to best practice, whether it be NIST, ISO 27001, COBIT, Cyber Essentials, whatever it is. You're able to say, I did that technology-wise, and I did it people-wise, but I joined the dots together. That is a fantastic place to get to. So they're my experiences, and what I have done differently since then.
If you could share anything with the community, given the action that you've seen and the sort of life of the real world incidents, what would you share?
This is why this call is so fantastic. That I alluded to the major points at the start when I opened up about former CIO pulling me to one side and said, look, the rate of change a company can tolerate, even though sometimes you have to do all of the things, but you can only pick and choose. And it's prioritizing those to the most important risks. That's the number one thing that I would say to any CISO starting out. You were to start in a new role tomorrow and suddenly find there's loads of different things missing. What would be the top 2, 3, or 4 things that you would prioritize? That the rate of change that wouldn't get in the way of the business succeeding. That obviously means talking to the business. One of the biggest things I did and what I learned from was setting up an information security steering committee. They were representatives of the entire business. A lot of folks would have been pro security. They understood that their particular departments had a lot of risk and they didn't want anything to happen. Where I had other people in the business who were like, maybe we don't have as much risk as maybe we would think, and we've never seen incidents in the past. And it's really healthy to have that dialogue, everyone in a room together, but it's not just the security person having that conversation. It's everybody as a peer group representing the business. So the business makes informed decisions as a consequence of that. So that would be the biggest thing, is to get representation from the business at a senior enough level that can speak on behalf of the business and take ownership of those risks on a prioritized basis. And then you say, okay, with limited time, people, and money, what are we going to do as a business that we're able to defend if something were to happen with the board, as well as senior executives and the whole company? This is what we're doing. That is a fantastic place to get to. You have the support from on high. You've got budgets aligned to risk. You've got your risk register, which is now showing we were on a residual basis, maybe, not where we wanted to be. This is what we prioritize. They become the projects for the year. You deliver them on the year. So that's number one. 2 is a human-centric approach. All too often we rush into technology, and technology is needed. I'm not saying it's not needed. Of course it's needed. It's part of best practice. It's there for a very good reason. But it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to prevent all incidents from happening. As I said, cybercriminals are targeting people. They call them the weakest link. They are not the weakest link. They are, in fact, the greatest security asset in every organization if they're helped correctly. If we do a better job of helping staff understand when they take a risk, when they don't even know they're taking it, that's the opportunity. Let's grasp that. How can we do that? The network. It's telling us. The technologies that find vulnerabilities, they're telling us there's vulnerabilities in a system, whether it be an APT style attack that shows the various levels of threats, vectors that can happen. Let's plug them. But that's somebody. So let's inform that somebody as to what they need to do when that's found. If somebody carries out an action that actually contravenes policy, well, send the little snippet of the policy tied to what they've just done. Human-centric, tied to that technical-centric approach, the multi-layered defenses. None of that changes. The onion, as we all talk about it, but we have to ensure that that human-centric is in there, because the incidents aren't going down, they're going up. Yet billions and billions are being spent. So we have to take a step back. If we keep doing the same things, we're going to get the same results. We're focusing on the root cause of most incidents and tying that back to our risk management, our policy, our people. We'll have massive wins, and it's a huge opportunity.
Stephen, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. It's a difficult thing to do from a security executive, where you're talking about incidents and things publicly. We typically don't like to do that, raise our head above the parapet and make ourselves a target, but I think it's important that we come together as a community and we share more information and to make it more difficult for the adversaries out there. So, as I said, Stephen, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully I'll have you back on another time where we can expand on this conversation.
It's been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.